Ilara stood at the balcony of her childhood home, staring at the horizon where the sun dipped behind the jagged mountains. The wind played with the edges of her long cloak, and the air smelled of pine and rain-soaked earth. In a few hours, she would be married. But her heart felt heavy, and a strange foreboding clung to her like a shadow. She had been promised to Lord Darren, a noble rising quickly in favor with the king. His reputation was impeccable, handsome, charming, clever. But there was a chill behind his smile, a quiet ambition that unnerved her. Ilara had never met him before this arrangement. Her parents had praised him as the perfect match, the one to secure her family's place in the court. Duty, they said. Obligation. Honor. But deep in her chest, Ilara felt a pulse of unease. Something about this match felt wrong. She shook her head, trying to quiet the thought. Perhaps she was overthinking. Intel Nuan, tel sinstade. Perhaps marriage always carried the weight of uncertainty. The palace where the wedding would take place was already buzzing with activity. Servants rushed through marble halls, arranging golden candlesticks, fresh flowers, and silks of deep crimson and gold. Torches had been lit along every corridor, their flames flickering nervously as if sensing the tension in the air. Guards stood at attention, their armor polished and swords gleaming, ready to maintain order or perhaps to witness a disaster. When she entered the hall, the grandeur of the ceremony struck her. Velvet banners hung from the walls, and a crystal chandelier scattered light like shattered stars across the polished floors. Guests whispered behind delicate fans, casting curious and calculating glances at her. Ilara felt like a bird trapped in a gilded cage, dressed in silk and lace that restrained her as much as it adorned her. Lord Darren appeared at the far end of the hall, waiting beneath the archway of carved stone. His hair was dark, his eyes calm but unreadable. When he smiled at her, it was like sunlight glinting on steel, warm in appearance, but carrying an edge of danger beneath. Ilara swallowed, forcing a polite smile. The priest began to speak, in the low, solemn tone, reserved for unions of power and blood. Words of loyalty, words of promise, words of lifelong commitment. But as Darren repeated each phrase, the unease in Ilara's chest grew. Something about him felt calculated. She could feel it, sharp and cold as a knife. After the vows, the hall erupted in polite applause. Guests cheered, and servants began arranging the feast. But Ilara could barely move. She felt trapped in the golden cage her parents had promised her would be freedom. That night, in the chambers assigned to them, Darren's politeness remained. He spoke carefully, as if each word were chosen for its usefulness rather than truth. "You are safe here," he said. "Everything will be as it should." Ilara nodded but did not speak. His calm confidence only made her senses sharper. There was a danger in him she could not yet name. And then, from the corner of the room, she noticed a small, sealed envelope addressed to him. She had no right to touch it, but curiosity gnawed at her. The envelope bore a crest she recognized from the stories of her childhood. The mark of the underbound empire, a secretive power that ruled the shadows of the kingdom, feared even by kings. Her hands trembled as she lifted the seal, her pulse quickening. Inside was a letter, written in elegant script. It spoke of a woman, warned a man to stay away from her. A woman whose identity was dangerous, powerful, and cursed. As her eyes fell on the faintly burned initials at the bottom, Ilara's breath caught. They were hers. A chill ran down her spine. The letter was meant for Darren. He had married her, knowing this warning existed. The implications twisted in her mind. She had not married for love, but Darren had married for power. Power that might come at the cost of her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden roar of thunder. Rain lashed against the palace windows, and the hallways echoed with the sound of the storm. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling doors and shaking the stone walls. Before she could move, the chamber door burst open, A figure cloaked in black entered, moving with a presence that seemed to command even the storm itself. His face was shadowed by a hood, but when he lifted it, the world seemed to pause. Cairo Vesper, ruler of the Underbound Empire, stood before her. His dark eyes seemed to pierce straight through the flickering torchlight, straight through the walls, straight through her heart. He did not speak to Darren, who had stepped forward, mouth opening to protest, then frozen in fear. Instead, Cairo's gaze fell upon Ilara. His voice, calm and even, carried across the hall. "You married the wrong man." The words were simple, but they echoed like a prophecy. Every guest froze. The torches flared, then dimmed, as if the light itself feared to witness this moment. Ilara's heart pounded. She did not know this man, yet there was something familiar in the steadiness of his presence, something that called to a memory buried deep in her past. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Darren stepped forward, attempting to assert authority. But Cairo ignored him completely. His eyes never left Ilara's face. "You belong somewhere else," he said softly, almost a whisper. Yet every word struck her like thunder. "Not with him. Not under false chains. You were meant for something greater." Ilara's mind whirled. The warning in the letter, the strange feelings in her chest, the unease she had felt since the wedding, all of it collided in a single, horrifying truth. She had married the wrong man. Not just wrong in the sense of affection, but wrong in the sense of fate. Cairo took a step closer, the cloak swirling like liquid night around him. "The Empire will protect you," he said. "Or you may claim it yourself. But, Darren, he cannot offer you what you truly need." Her breath caught. The enormity of the moment pressed down on her like the weight of mountains. All her life, she had tried to be dutiful, obedient, careful, and yet here she was, standing on the edge of a storm far greater than anything she could have imagined. Darren's face had turned pale, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You cannot do this," he said, his voice shaking. "This is my bride, my right, my—" Cairo's hand moved like lightning, cutting through the air. Darren froze, unable to advance another word. Cairo did not strike him physically. The gesture alone carried authority so absolute, it silenced even the bravest hearts. Ilara felt something she had never known, a pull in her chest, a calling that seemed older than the kingdom itself. This man, this mysterious Shadow King, was tied to her past, to the choices she had not yet understood, to the fate she had never been allowed to choose. She swallowed hard, looking between the man she had been forced to marry and the man who seemed to know her soul. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. Then, with the storm pounding the palace walls like an army at war, she understood. Her life was no longer hers alone. It had been stolen by duty and ambition. But now, destiny itself had come to reclaim her. And Cairo's words rang in her ears, sharper than any sword. "You married the wrong man. This union ends tonight." Ilara's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to flee, but the words died on her lips. The hall seemed to shrink around her. Class. The torches flared once more, shadows stretching long across the floor. The storm outside roared in agreement. The air smelled of lightning and rain, of earth and iron, of power returning to a world that had long forgotten it. And then, as the wind tore through the hall, Ilara realized the truth that would change everything. She did not need saving from Darren alone. She needed to understand why Cairo had returned, why the Underbound Empire had suddenly claimed her life as its own, and why, in some impossible way, her destiny was bound to this man she barely knew. Her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. Her future had been stolen, and now it had been offered back in a storm of shadows, choice, and impossible questions. The night would not end quietly, and Alara, standing in the flickering torchlight, knew this was only the beginning. Cliffhanger. Cairo stepped closer, his dark eyes locking on hers. "Follow me," he whispered, "or your life, and everything you love, will be lost forever." Alara's hands shook, her chest heaved, and as the first bolt of lightning split the sky above, she realized she had no choice but to step into the storm. The storm had driven the guests back into the palace halls, leaving the wedding chamber empty, save for Alara, Cairo, and the trembling figure of Darren. Lightning cut through the night sky, illuminating Cairo's face for a fleeting moment. His eyes were dark, deep, and unreadable. But for Alara, there was a strange warmth beneath the shadows, a calm that seemed impossible from a man so feared. He turned to her fully, his cloak billowing like living smoke around his shoulders. "You belong somewhere else," he repeated, his voice steady, but carrying a weight she could feel in her bones. "Not with him, not under chains that are not yours. You were meant for more than this marriage, Alara." Alara's fingers clenched at the folds of her gown. Her chest ached. She wanted to run, to escape, but the air felt heavy, almost magnetic, pulling her toward him. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why are you here?" Cairo's gaze softened, a faint trace of something almost human breaking through the mask of authority. "You saved me once," he said. "Long ago, when no one knew who I was. You showed kindness to a stranger in need, without thought of power or fear. That memory stayed with me, Alara. And now, it has drawn me back to you." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. Memories she could not fully recall flickered at the edge of her mind. An echo of a moment long ago, a shadow of a hand she had helped, a stranger's whisper of gratitude in the dark. Her chest tightened with both fear and recognition. "And Darren?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He is my husband. He has rights." Cairo shook his head, slowly, almost sadly. "He married you to manipulate fate, to use your life as a pawn. You were never his, Alara. And if you stay with him, he will drag you into chaos you cannot control." Darren's face had turned pale, his earlier arrogance slipping into panic. "This is nonsense," he barked. "I am your husband. You cannot." Cairo raised a single hand, and Darren froze, as if the words themselves had been snatched from the air. Cairo's presence did not threaten with violence, yet it commanded obedience more absolute than any army. "You have made your choice," he said quietly. "It is too late for you now." Alara's heart raced. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside her chest. She wanted to believe Cairo, yet fear gnawed at her. Who was this man, who spoke of destiny and curses as if they were simple truths? And yet, there was something in his voice she could not deny, a connection, older than her memory, older than the walls of the palace itself. She followed him, stepping past Darren, past the marble halls now slick with rain and shadows. Cairo moved silently, his cloak brushing the floor, his presence folding the darkness around them like a protective shroud. He led her to a hidden chamber beneath the palace, a place where the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient power. Candles burned in soft, golden pools of light, illuminating symbols carved into the stone symbols that felt familiar to her, though she could not place why. "Why here?" she asked, her voice small. "What is this place?" "This is where the underbound empire has kept its secrets for centuries," Cairo said. "And it is where I will show you what you truly are and what you can become." Alara's pulse quickened. The room hummed with energy, a quiet vibration that seemed to echo in her chest. She realized, with a sudden clarity, that her life had been far more intertwined with this empire than she had ever imagined. Her family's lands, her childhood village, even her own faint dreams of power and purpose, They all seemed to circle around this unseen force, this shadow that had been guiding her without her knowledge. Cairo turned to her, his dark eyes holding hers. "There is a curse on your bloodline, Elara," he said softly. "It is tied to love, betrayal, and power. It awakens when those who would use you for gain attempt to control your fate. Your husband has awakened it. And if it is not managed, it could consume both of you." If it is not managed, Elara felt a chill run through her. A curse. She had heard tales of such things, whispered in fearful tones by the elders of her village. Magic that carried consequences far greater than any mortal could withstand. And now it had touched her, as if the world itself had marked her for something dangerous and magnificent. "You can control it," Cairo continued, stepping closer, his presence grounding yet overwhelming. "But only if you understand your power and choose your path." Her hands shook. "And if I refuse?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "What happens then?" He looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Then you remain bound to Darren, and the curse will spread. The Empire will not interfere, and your life may be lost in chaos you cannot escape." Elara swallowed hard. Fear and confusion warred with the strange pull in her chest, the pull that drew her toward Cairo, and the possibility of freedom he offered. He was dangerous, mysterious, and perhaps impossible to trust. But he was also the only one who seemed to see her, truly see her, as more than a pawn in a game she had not chosen to play. Over the next days, Cairo remained close, guiding her through secret passages and chambers filled with ancient texts and relics. He taught her to sense the currents of power, to feel the boundaries of the curse, and to test the limits of her own courage. Each lesson brought a mixture of exhilaration and fear, but also something else, a bond that neither could name aloud. In quiet moments, Elara noticed the weight Cairo carried. The Empire feared him, even those who served under him. Yet when he looked at her, he softened, and the formidable shadow of a king seemed to shift into something fragile, almost human. She wondered why someone so feared, so powerful, could reveal tenderness only to her, and whether she could trust the feelings that stirred within her own heart. One night, after hours of study and preparation, she paused to catch her breath. Her hands were trembling from exertion and emotion alike. Cairo observed her silently, his dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly, "and yet you fear yourself. That fear is what the curse will exploit. You must learn to trust your own strength. And trust me." Elara's chest tightened. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You ask me to leave everything behind, my home, my family, even my husband." He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "You are not leaving. You are choosing. Choosing yourself, your destiny, and your freedom. No one else can grant it to you." Her gaze faltered. She felt the stirrings of a truth she had not dared acknowledge, that her heart had already begun to lean toward this mysterious man, who offered protection, knowledge, and perhaps something more, something dangerous, something real. Suddenly, a vision struck her as she touched a carved symbol in the chamber, a flash of light and shadow, a glimpse of a future both terrifying and wondrous. In it, she saw Cairo falling, struck by forces she could not yet understand, his life in peril because of her. Her hands went to her mouth, and her heart pounded in sudden fear. Cairo caught her trembling, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Elara," he said softly, "do not fear me. Fear losing me. If you choose wisely, you will save more than yourself." Tears pricked her eyes. The weight of choice pressed down upon her between duty and destiny, fear and courage. The man she had married, and the man who now claimed her future. The storm outside raged as if echoing her inner turmoil, rattling windows and shaking the very foundations of the palace. And in that moment, she realized the truth her vision had hinted at. She could not remain passive. The curse, the empire, her heart, they demanded a decision. She could no longer be a pawn. She would have to act, even if she did not yet fully understand the consequences. Cairo stepped back, giving her space, yet his presence remained a tether, a steadying force in the whirlwind of her fear and uncertainty. "Decide, Alara," he said gently, "or fate will decide for you." Fate. Fate. Her chest heaved with the enormity of it all. She was alone in the chamber, yet not alone. She was bound to Cairo's empire, to her own destiny, to the curse that had awakened around her. The choices before her were impossible, yet the clarity of one truth pierced through the storm. She did not belong with Darren. She had been chosen for something far greater. And just as she was about to speak, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. Candles flickered violently, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. A distant, echoing sound reverberated through the palace like the wail of spirits disturbed from centuries of slumber. Ilara's eyes widened in alarm. She turned to Cairo, who stiffened, his jaw tight. "The curse," he whispered, a note of dread creeping into his voice. "It is stronger than I feared." The shadows around them seemed to pulse with life. A voice, distant and ancient, whispered through the stone walls, faint but chilling. "The one who claims the empire must face the darkness, or be consumed by it." Ilara's heart pounded. She had hoped to understand, to choose, to claim her own destiny safely. But now, the danger was real, immediate, and closer than ever. The chamber seemed to close around them. And she knew with terrifying certainty, her journey with Cairo was only beginning. Cliffhanger. Ilara turned to him, her voice trembling, eyes wide. What must we do?" Cairo's gaze darkened, but his hand reached for hers, steady and strong. And outside, the storm howled louder than ever, as if the world itself demanded their courage and foretold the trials yet to come. The storm had passed, leaving the palace grounds slick with rain and the scent of wet stone in the air. Ilara stood at the edge of the balcony in the hidden chamber, looking down at the sprawling city below. It was quiet now, but she knew the silence was only temporary. The curse that had awakened within her was still restless, pulsing like a living heartbeat in her veins. Cairo stepped beside her, his presence calm, solid, and impossibly strong. She could feel it, the quiet force of a man who had survived countless battles, who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, yet now seemed willing to share that burden with her. "Are you ready? Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, steady. Ilara swallowed. I think I am," she said, though uncertainty lingered. "But what if I fail? What if this curse destroys everything?" Cairo's gaze softened. "You will not fail, Ilara. The curse is not a punishment, it is a test. And you have already begun to pass it, simply by choosing to face it." She felt a spark of courage at his words, though the fear still clung to her. She had learned so much in the past days about herself, about her powers, about the delicate balance between fear and courage, duty and destiny. And most of all, she had begun to understand the truth Cairo had shown her, that she was not a pawn. She was a player, and the game had only just begun. Their return to the palace proper was cautious. The halls were quiet, but tension lingered like a thick fog. Darren had not been idle. Rumors of his alliances with ancient spirits and his own ambition to seize the empire for himself had reached them. Ilara knew the final confrontation would not be easy, and that it would demand every ounce of her courage and every spark of the power the curse had awakened within her. They found him in the throne room, pacing as if the shadows themselves whispered secrets only he could hear. His eyes widened when he saw Cairo and Ilara enter together, a pair of impossible strength and quiet command. "You cannot," he began, but his words faltered under Cairo's unwavering gaze. Cairo stepped forward, calm and precise. "Darren," he said, "your path ends here. You have misused her, tried to turn her into a weapon for your ambition. That ends now." Elara felt her own power stir, a rising heat of magic and destiny within her. The curse had been restless for days, but now it pulsed with focus, responding to her clarity of purpose. She realized that Darren's threats and schemes had only strengthened her resolve. She would not be used. She would not be frightened. She would claim her life, her empire, her choice, her heart. Darren laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the hall. "You think you can stop me? A noble, with power, allies, and ancient forces? At my command?" Cairo's expression did not waver. "Power without heart is nothing," he said, "and you have none left to wield." Elara stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly with the energy she now controlled. The symbols from Cairo's chamber, the ones carved in stone and alive with magic, flared in her mind. She could feel their strength, not as a burden, but as a tool, as a guide. Her fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into purpose. With a wordless signal, Cairo advanced beside her, their combined presence a force that even the ancient spirits Darren had called could not oppose. The chamber seemed to pulse in response, the very walls resonating with the power of their bond. Darren's spells erupted, shadows twisting like serpents around him. But Elara met them with calm, precise control, bending the energy not to destroy, but to contain. The shadows hissed and recoiled, bound by the strength of her will and the steady support of Cairo. "You see?" Cairo murmured, his hand brushing hers as they moved in perfect coordination. "You are stronger than you know. You have never been alone." The fight seemed to last hours, though perhaps it was only moments. Every heartbeat was a battle, every breath a negotiation between fear and courage. And at last, Darren's spells faltered, his control slipping as the combined force of Elara's courage and Cairo's presence overwhelmed him. The shadows collapsed into nothingness, leaving him pale, exhausted, and powerless. Elara approached him, her chest heaving, eyes steady. "It is over," she said. "You will not harm anyone else, and you will leave this palace forever." Darren's lips trembled, and for a moment. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw something he had never anticipated. Not fear, not submission, but clarity, strength, and command. He knew the game was over. He slumped to the ground, defeated not by force alone, but by the choice she had made, to claim her destiny. Elara turned to Cairo, who had remained silent, watching her every movement. Their eyes met, and she saw something there that made her heart flutter. Pride, relief, and something deeper, something she had not allowed herself to name until now. "You have done it," he said softly. "You have faced the curse and controlled it. You are extraordinary." Her chest heaved with both exhaustion and triumph. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted, her voice quiet but earnest. Cairo stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "No," he said firmly. "You could. You always could. I was only here to remind you." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the weight of everything that had passed between them lingering in the air. The storm had left the palace silent, yet alive with a new energy. A sense that the world had shifted, that something old had ended and something new had begun. And then, in a quiet, almost hesitant voice, Cairo spoke again. "Elara, you have a choice now. You may walk away from all of this, return to your old life, and leave the empire behind. Or," his eyes softened, a shadow of vulnerability showing beneath the strength, Or, you may take what is yours. The Empire, the future, and me. Alara's heart stuttered at his words. The offer was not just of power, but of partnership, trust, and perhaps even love, the kind she had never imagined could exist for someone like her. Her mind raced, thinking of duty, of the freedom she had never had, of the strange pull she felt toward Cairo from the first moment he appeared. She began, then faltered. Her gaze dropped, and she felt the courage rise within her once more. I choose, she said, her voice steady. I choose, us, together, whatever comes. Cairo's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of astonishment and relief crossing his face. Then he took her hand firmly, pressing it to his chest. Then, it is yours, he said. The Empire is yours, and I will stand by you, always. A sense of peace, of resolution, washed over Alara. The curse had been mastered, Darren defeated, and the Empire now lay not as a burden, but as a promise, a future they could shape together. Yet even as the victory settled around them, the air shifted. From the depths of the palace, a whisper drifted, faint and chilling, like a breeze carrying the scent of distant danger. Alara stiffened, her heart quickening. Cairo noticed immediately, his hand tightening around hers. What is it? She asked, her voice tense. He closed his eyes briefly, sensing the stir of energy that had returned. A new force, he said slowly. Something older than even the Empire itself. The curse was only the beginning. And now, another challenge approaches. Alara's chest tightened, but this time, not with fear. She felt a steady resolve, a determination that had been forged in fire and shadow. Whatever came next, she knew she would not face it alone. Cairo was at her side, and together they could confront any storm, any darkness, any threat to their lives, or the empire they now shared. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the depth of what had grown between them. A connection forged not just in danger, but in trust, courage, and understanding. And in that glance, Cairo mirrored her thoughts. A promise unspoken, but deeply understood. The palace was quiet once more. The storm outside, a memory fading into the night. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls like silent witnesses to the new chapter of their lives. And, as Alara and Cairo stood together, hand in hand, she felt a sense of clarity and purpose, unlike anything she had known before. Cliffhanger resolution. The empire was hers. Cairo was by her side. And though the curse and the ancient powers of the world still lingered, she now knew one truth above all. She would never be a pawn again. But as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, a distant rumble echoed from beyond the city walls, a warning that their journey was far from over. Alara's fingers tightened around Cairo's, and together they faced the horizon, ready to meet whatever fate awaited. Alara whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "We are ready." And Cairo, looking down at her with a dark, unwavering gaze, replied, softly but firmly, "Always, Alara, always."